In the British general election of May the 3rd, 1979, the issues were basically Britain's governability, and then which one of the three main political parties would be able to create the greatest social harmony, especially between the working class and the upper class, the laborers and employers, and which party would be able to revive the British economy in a stronger way, although Britain had come out of the worst economic crisis. It had even had to apply for a loan from the International Monetary Fund, which was very humiliating action, a very humiliating action for a major industrialized nation. The inflation rate had peaked at 25 or 26% in 1975, and the real wages adjusted for inflation had fallen by 6% in 1977. Having lost his tiny three-seat majority, the Prime Minister James Callaghan had had to make a deal with the Liberals in the summer of 1977 so that the Liberals would support the minority Labour government on questions of the budget and overall confidence. The deal had expired in the summer of 1978. During August 1978, Prime Minister Callaghan had really considered the possibility of calling a general election for that autumn. However, he had come to the conclusion, based on the Labour Party's own opinion surveys, that even in the best case scenario, the Labourites would only win a plurality of the seats, but not an overall majority. Therefore, he announced on September the 5th, 1978, that in order to sustain and strengthen the British economic recovery, he would not call a general election. The official opposition leader, Conservative Margaret Thatcher, was quick to condemn the decision, claiming that, in her opinion, when a prime minister loses his majority, he loses the right to govern. From November 1978 to February 1979, Britain was ravaged by waves of strikes, and even such humble employees as grave diggers, funeral car drivers, and rubbish or garbage collectors joined the strikes in several cities. When eventually these strikes, which protested against the pay restraint, in other words, the maximum percentage of a wage increase could be 5% per year in order to control inflation. Eventually, an accord was reached in negotiations between the labour unions, employers' organisations and the British government. Then came the fateful Welsh and Scottish devolution referendums held on March the 1st, 1979, where not only had an overall majority to be achieved for the establishment of Welsh and Scottish regional parliaments with a limited taxation power, but 40% of all eligible voters had to also support the devolution plans. In Wales, some 2/3 of the participating voters rejected the devolution proposal. In Scotland, over 51% of them did accept it, but this represented under 33% of the overall Scottish electorate. After observing the results, Prime Minister Callaghan announced that his government would not pursue the devolution plans, which cost the government the Scottish National Party's support. And towards the end of March 1979, the government lost a vote of confidence by just one vote. I think the vote was 311 to 310 in the House of Commons, and soon after that, Prime Minister Callaghan announced that the general election would be held on May the 3rd, 1979. He probably later regretted his decision not to call a general election for, say, October 1978, because back then the Labourites had still been over 5% more popular than the Conservatives, according to the opinion surveys. Anyway, Margaret Thatcher promised to dynamically restructure the British economy and society, declaring that free choice is what life is all about. And he blamed the country's economic problems on an excessive welfare state and on excessively close relationships between the government and labor unions. The Conservatives received 43.9% of the vote and 339 seats, thus enabling Mrs. Thatcher to become the first and so far one of only two female prime ministers of Britain. James Callaghan, despite his efforts, was only able to secure 269 seats for the Labourites with 36.9% of the vote. The Liberals' new leader, David Steel, saw their vote fall to 13.8%. The Liberals took only 11 seats. The rest of the seats were divided between some regional and nationalist parties.